Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
I had been reading since 14, 15 years old. I've been reading about Indian philosophy. I was fascinated by it. And anyway, I'll cut out the long story. Me and my friend, who was later to become Ajit Prabhu, we decided when we were at university to leave our studies for a year or so and travel overland to India. And by that time, we both had read a little bit more about Indian philosophy. And we also studied philosophy at the university. But we decided to take this year, or possibly 2 years, to go to India and see what we could find, which we did. And we went overland, and somewhere along the line in Afghanistan, we have to remember this is in the 68 possibly. There were quite a few hippies or travelers, as we used to call ourselves in those days, on the road. Most of them were very interested in Indian philosophy, or at least spiritual discussions. So we used to have spiritual discussions whenever we met at the different hotels along the way to India. So this was in Afghanistan, and we came to the hotel there and got ourselves installed. And in the evening, we met other people who were living in the hotel. And immediately we started our quest for truth, which most of them there were on. And so we're speaking about this and that. And I had this person with me, and he said, well, look, if you want to know something about spiritual life, then you have to read the Bhagavad Gita. And I said, well, I've already read it in an early Swedish translation. And he said, no, you have to have a very special Bhagavad Gita. And then he went to get this Gita, and it turned out to be Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, the first blue Collier Macmillan Bhagavad Gita with the foreword of Allen Ginsberg and so forth. And he said, you can borrow this, and you'll see that this is the bona fide, I didn't use those words, edition. So I took it and read it, and as it so happened, this man, he was smuggling in statues. He was smuggling drugs, which means hashish, to New York. And the police found out, so they came to the hotel, and he had to run away. So he ran, and there I was. Bhagavad Gita came and were in my hands as a gift. And I kept reading it. And later, we came, me and Ajit, we ended up in Pakistan, and in a hotel. And then we met the same man there. And he wanted his Bhagavad Gita back. So I said, oh, it's, I've packed it in my gear. I'll give it to you in the morning. But during the night, the police came for him. The Pakistani police came for him because they had connection with the Afghan police. And he had to run again. And he did. He ran. And there I was with the Bhagavad Gita again. and I was reading it, and I was very enthused about the contents, of course, and we started looking for Krishna. We came to India, and of course you see Krishna everywhere in the street names and the shop names everywhere, and their posters. So we got a lot of Krishna, and but we had the book and we were reading it. Then so many things happened, and we traveled in India. We traveled up to Nepal because Nepal had just opened up for foreigners, for Westerners. It had been a closed kingdom, but it was just opened up, and so we were there for quite a few months, and then we went on to go to Malaysia and Indonesia, and I won't talk too much about that trip. Well, we got onto a ship that would take us along the islands all the way to the last island, which was Indonesian Timor. At that time, Timor was divided into two: the Indonesian side and then the Portuguese side. And in the Portuguese side, there was a small airport, small airplanes that flew across to Darwin in Australia, in the very top of Australia. So we made our way there, and after a lot of adventures, we finally got onto that plane and came to Australia. And again, a lot of things happened, and eventually we ended up in Sydney. From Darwin down to Perth, and Perth across the desert to Sydney. And we were quite a few people living in a small flat in King's Cross, as it was called. And one day Ajit went out for a walk in the evening. He came back very excited, and he said, "Wow, I met devotees." And of course, we didn't quite know what devotees were then. We had read the Bhagavad Gita, but we didn't know that there were, people personifying it. So he came up with a small brochure and about chanting Hare Krishna. And we were reading that and getting quite excited. And I decided to, one day he went to work, I decided to not work and go to the temple. Came to the temple, and I was received by Upendra and by Bali Madam Prabhus, the two of them that had arrived from USA. And there I saw, in the temple room, I saw the same edition of Bhagavad Gita that I had. And therefore, there I became very convinced this is where I shall investigate. And so we went to the temple quite a few times, and then we decided to join the temple. But we thought that we had too many hippie friends in Sydney, so it would make it difficult. We would travel to London and join the temple in London. So we started on that journey. Ajit had a few things happening to him, so he decided to go back after traveling to one side of Australia. He decided to go back and join the temple there. Me and my girlfriend, who later became my wife, Padmavati, we decided to go on first to India, which we did, and it was New Year's Eve, I think, 1970. Yes. as we went to India, and well, a little before actually, and we grew a little tired of India, and we decided to we see where the devotees are, because we had been told in Sydney that the devotees had arrived in India from USA, and that Prabhupada was going to come. So we decided to look for Prabhupada. All this time we were reading Prabhupada's books. By this time we had Ishopanishad also, and teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which we used with a nice, beautiful picture of Krishna standing with the cows and Radharani. And we used that to offer our food. All the time we're reading Prabhupada's words. And then we decided we have to find Prabhupada. He's in India. And we were told that he was in Bombay. And so we went to Bombay, or Mumbai as it's called now, to look for him. And we were sent all over the place. People, in India, they don't really want to disappoint you by saying no. They say yes, and but they don't really know. So we were sent on a goose chase all over the place, all the Ramakrishna missions in Bombay, and there were many, and many other temples, and there were no devotees. No one had ever seen them, no one heard them, and so we went for a whole week, whole days just looking for them, couldn't find them. And in the last day, we decided we'll do one more day, and then we'll go on to London. And so I was sure we wouldn't find that last day, so I went to a music store to buy a musical instrument. And as usual, we started asking about, do you know anything about Bhaktivedanta Swami and Western devotees? And he said, yes. And of course, many people have said that before. He says, yes, they're not far away from here. I think that was the shop was on Marine Drive. And so I'll take you there when I finish my job here. So a little hope, but not much. We'd gone to many places, many mats and many temples, Ramakrishna missions. But he took us there by a long walk. And if you know Bombay and Marine Drive and how it goes, Kemp's Corner, and then on with it, these are very modern, the modern part of Bombay. And with sky rise, tall buildings. And he stopped at a building called Akash Ganga building. He said, they're in here. I said, a temple in here? I hadn't really envisioned a temple in a modern multi-story building, apartment building. He says, yes, it's in here. And we went up there. We went on the 7th floor, I think, and knocked on the door. And lo and behold, there were devotees there. So we lived in a hotel downtown, and we used to come every morning early to be there for Mangal Aarti, and yeah. And in the end, we thought, well, this is traveling back and forth like this. We'll ask if we can join, which we were allowed. So we were actually the first Western devotees to join in India. And Prabhupada was due to come a few weeks ahead, so my first duty was to clean Prabhupada's room that was to become Prabhupada's room, because this was a very, very new flat, very, very new apartment. So I had to clean that. And in the meantime, we also went to collect all sorts of rice and charcoal in preparation for the big Pandal program. there was due to be a big Pandal program where Prabhupada was going to preach for 11 days, morning and evening. And so we collected rice and grains and ghee and all these things. Actually, I was traveling quite a bit with Shyamsundar Prabhu, who was an expert driver. Expert driver means driving India style, which would scare the life out of any other person, but he was very cool about it. And so we collected all these foodstuffs so we could cook and distribute prasadam at the pandal, the big tent. And then I also went out with Giriraj Maharaj to make life members, to collect money and to spread the news about the big festival. So there was very intensive days. And then Prabhupada came. And this is the long story ends up here. When I saw Prabhupada coming from at the airport, I was totally amazed. Two things, or actually, come to think of it, three things. First of all, he was so small. Secondly, he was a giant. He was both small and a giant. Looking at him, you saw a giant of a man. Very special person, very royal, very regal, aristocrat. And of course, all devotees know what I mean, just by looking at Prabhupada. And the third thing was that I felt that I knew him. I had, read his purports and his books, and I thought, I felt like I knew him, especially when he spoke. Once you got used to the Indian accent, then, his words were known to me. I'd read them. So it immediately was this feeling of, this man is genuine. This is a real, genuine devotee of Lord Krishna. And of course, later on, that was confirmed, getting to know Prabhupada. In the early days, in the Akash Ganga building, Prabhupada had his room, of course, but the door was mostly open, and we could go in there and listen to him speak. If he spoke to someone, we could listen to him sing. If he sang, so open, and Prabhupada would come out and mingle with us in a very natural sense. And it was different from what I've come to call the Vyasa San Prabhupada. And he was very intimate, very natural. So then I started to realize, yes, he is absolutely genuine. What he speaks is how he lives. He is an acharya. He lives his teachings. And it was quite a revelation because, I'd been very interested in Indian philosophy, and I had read about different types of yogis and so forth. But this is the first time that I came to that realization. He is what he says, a devotee of the Lord. So that gave a lot of faith in the whole philosophy. Prabhupada personified the philosophy. And then I was fortunate enough to become his servant from India, and traveling with him through Malaysia in different preaching places, temples, and otherwise preaching at life members. Prabhupada traveled in Malaysia up and down. and being with him there, and going from Malaysia and via Singapore to Sydney, back to Sydney. For me, it was back to Sydney, and for Prabhupada, it was the first time there. And in Malaysia, I'd been running around everywhere to try and secure a visa for Prabhupada to go to Australia, which wasn't easy, and we didn't have much time. So it involved running around everywhere to the consulate people, the embassy. It was just so much work to do that I finally got the visa for Prabhupada. And as we realized when we were about to board the plane to Australia, I'd forgotten to get a visa for myself, and they wouldn't let me on the plane. And that was a shock to me. Well, Prabhupada wasn't shocked, I guess, but it was very inconvenient for him to lose his servant there. But I managed to convince the airplane people, put me on the plane, and if you can't let me, if they can't let me in, I'll have to pay the ticket back. So that's what they did, strangely enough, but they did, and put me on the plane, and I was with Prabhupada traveling to Sydney, which is about 8-9 hours traveling there. We got to Sydney, and Prabhupada could walk through the immigration, no problem. He had the visa. I was stopped, of course, which I was very nervous about. And the officer, he said, "No, you can't come in." But I said, "I was in Australia 6 months ago, and I had a visa to enter." He said, "But you didn't have a multiple entry, so you can't come in." And I said, "Well, this is my spiritual master here. I have to be with him." Anyway, a lot of arguing back and forth. And then he sent me to his supervisor, and the supervisor said, "So what arguments do you have? Why should we let you in?" He said, "Because I'm married to an Australian woman," which I was, because we got married and initiated and married in Bombay during the Pandal program. He said, "So where are your papers showing that you're married?" I said, "Well, this was India. It was like a temple situation, and they don't issue papers. But I do have photographs." And he laughed, and he looked at the photographs. Guru Das had taken some photographs of the wedding, and he just laughed, and he said, "All right." And I was totally amazed. He took up his stamp, and he stamped the passport. And when I looked, it said indefinite stay, which means I could stay as long as I liked. Now, I thought that was a miracle. I thought that was yet another of Prabhupada's miracles. Anyway, so I got through and went with Prabhupada and the meeting devotees that came to the temple in Sydney. And they had moved since I was there last. And Prabhupada and me, and I think Bali Madan, I'm not sure about that, lived in a flat that was given to Prabhupada during his stay by a very nice householder couple. And so we stayed in an apartment outside the temple, and Prabhupada would come and lecture at the temple and to initiate devotees. First initiation for Ajit Prabhu and I'm not sure, 7, 8 other possibly. Some Brahmin initiation, and so I got that there. And Prabhupada was also installing deities, Radha Gopinath, and where did they come from? Well, the story was that when we were in Bombay in the Akash Ganga building, all of a sudden 2 big crates came, and they came from Australia, and they were sent from India to Australia and then back to India because a person, a friend of the temple, had bought deities for the temple, sent them to the old address, and of course the postman couldn't find them, and they were sent back to India, and eventually they ended up with the devotees in Akash Ganga building. So when we went, Prabhupada and I went with him, I sat with Radharani on my knee in the box, of course. Krishna had to travel where most of the luggage was. So these deities were installed in the Paddington Temple in Sydney. Prabhupada was there for quite a few preaching engagements, and television, radio, and some, I think it was called the Wayside Chapel. It was like a Christian preaching center directed mainly at drug takers and hippies or whatever you want to call them. So present the good news to them. And Prabhupada spoke there. We arrived in Darwin, which is in northwest Australia, the northern west tip there. And so many stories. We were refused because we didn't have any money, but somehow or other, one of the people in our group, he had money. He was an Englishman. He had money. He's going to buy an old car so we could travel down there. But so he showed the money and he got through, and we didn't get through, me and Ajit. But in the room where we were sitting, there was a window. So he came by from the outside, and the money that he had shown the border guards, he gave to us. And we walked through as if we suddenly had discovered money that we had. So we got through also. In Darwin, we had some problems. The main problem being, when the pubs closed, which was at that time, I think 10 o'clock in the evening, a lot of these pub dwellers went outside looking for trouble. They wanted to fight. And of course, we looked different. We looked like travelers, hippies, and with Indian clothes. And so we were advised not to stay in town close to a pub. So we went to the beach again, and we were told that the police will probably come in the night and get us moving on, but they didn't. So we lay down, and I put my hat on I knew there was a sign there, and I used the bottom of that sign as a pillow, but I couldn't read. It was too dark to read what it said. So I slept very nicely at night, and in the morning I looked at the sign, and it says, "Beware of crocodiles." What I didn't know was that there are a species called saltwater crocodiles. They live in the sea. And they also go into the saltwater rivers. So I had no idea that there would be crocodiles in the sea. So I guess we were lucky or protected, whichever way you want to see it. And then we went on down to Perth, a trip that took us 6 days, I think, because it's very, Australia is a huge country. And eventually, I'm going to cut the story very short. Eventually, after some adventures in Perth, we went across. Our group got a little split up, and I came a little afterwards. They went first across the desert to Sydney, and I came a little after. I got sick. I had a problem with my heart, and so I came a little after. I did have a problem with the heart and other problems, but they went ahead, and I sort of hitchhiked from Perth to Sydney, and it's a long, long, long way. It took me 7 days, and I arrived and met my friends there, including Ajit. And I met my wife there also for the first time. And so we clicked, and we've remained there, the last 52 or 53 years, whatever it is. And so that was very nice. And then we met devotees of Prabhupada. Ajit met them. I think I've already spoken about that, and it was very joyous time when he came back to the flat, and he had the brochure with him about it was the on chanting brochure. So that made me look more actively to see if I could meet these devotees, which I did, and I think I've spoken about that too. But the whole thing led to a more Krishna conscious approach to life. We used to come to the Sunday feasts and between the feasts. So in the end, we used to go a lot to the temple. And then we decided, me and Ajit decided, and my wife decided, our girlfriend then, decided we shall go to Europe. We felt that, Ajit and I felt that it would be very difficult to join there in Sydney because of so many friends. So we started preparing to go back, and we did. We all three of us traveled to back to Perth, where Ajit's girlfriend was situated, and we thought we'd pick her up on the way, so to speak, but something happened, and it didn't work out that way for Ajit, so he went back to the temple. And me and my girlfriend, Padmavati now, but she became that. We decided to go on to Europe, and I was going to join the temple in London. We came to Sri Lanka, stayed around there for a while, went into India, southern India, and hung around there. We saw some temples, and then we decided to go to Goa, and we stayed there for a month or so, maybe a little more, and then we decided, and there was no use hanging around. We'll just go to Bombay and start looking for the devotees. And because we'd heard by letter, Ajit wrote me from Sydney, the Sydney temple, saying that Prabhupada is now in India. So I decided to go and find him. And we heard that he was going to come to Bombay. So we looked for the temple everywhere, couldn't find it. Spent a whole week looking day and night for the devotees. And we were pointed in all sorts of directions. And in the end, we just said, well, one more day, and then we shall go on our journey back to London. It so happened that I met someone that actually knew. He actually knew for the first time where the devotees were, and he offered to take us there, which he did. And then it was a very joyous moment when meeting the devotees. Oh, actually, they existed. And Prabhupada hadn't come yet. We were told that he was coming in a week or two. And so we kept going back to our hotel, and then to the temple every day, every morning, Mangalarti. In the end, we thought this is a waste of time. We shall ask if we can join the temple here in Bombay, which we did, and they said, sure, you can come and move into the temple. We did, and we helped with preparing the temple for Prabhupada's arrival. The temple was just a big flat, many rooms, big flat. And Prabhupada had his room, and my duty was to prepare that room for Prabhupada. It was, no one's ever lived in that flat before, so it was a lot of cleaning to do, very dusty, and insects actually, which I sort of thought, what am I going to do? I don't want to kill these insects. What am I going to do? In the end, I took them away, swept them away, and then these are the ants. And somehow or other, they must have understood not to come there, so they disappeared, more or less. I remember when Prabhupada came, he was sitting there one night eating rasgullas, and he had some sandesh, and there were some ants on it, or one or two anyway. So devotees, I don't remember, offered to take it away, and he said, no, it doesn't matter, they don't eat much. And I thought that was very helpful understanding. We Westerners generally, when we see insects, we want to kill them and stomp on them or hit them or kill the flies, kill the mosquitoes. But Prabhupada just, they don't eat much. So that is the equal eye that the devotee sees with, whether you're in the body of a brahmana or a dog eater or an insect, doesn't matter. Equal eye, servant of the Lord. Quite early, I thought I stumbled onto the secret of Prabhupada's success. How is it possible, that you get people in their youth, when the desire to enjoy the world is the greatest? How is it possible that you can get so many young people to give up this desire? And of course we say, well, it is because Krishna satisfies us so much that we leave the enjoyment of the world. Well, I think there's another secret to that, which I experienced in Bombay. And that is that Prabhupada's conviction was so strong, so powerful, that it just infused and enthused us. When you were close to Prabhupada, you could not help but be influenced by his absolute conviction that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that we are his servants. There was no question, no doubt about it. No trying to excuse yourself. No, it was straightforward. I am a servant of the Lord. I am not this body. I am a spirit soul servant of the Lord. That conviction was so clear, and it permeated the whole of Prabhupada's being and the room that he was in. And I think that we all felt that. We all felt it, and we all became very convinced. So that is the power of the pure devotee. And it's not this artificial power, artificial show of force. Prabhupada wasn't like that. He was just naturally, totally convinced of who he was. Totally self-realized. And there's no question. So that was the secret to Prabhupada's success, in my mind. You can, from a sociological point of view, you can point to the fact that, yes, these were times with the hippie movements. They already made like a revolution against capitalism and this exploitation. So this was a good time to appear. Well, Prabhupada did appear at this time, and the young people were a little rootless. They had left their parents' values to a certain extent, and were looking for new values, spiritual life. Well, Prabhupada did come right into that very, very core of people who were interested in a spiritual life, but didn't have much guidance. Prabhupada was there to give guidance, and his conviction and his power, the way he spoke, did the whole thing. So this is the power of the pure devotee. That a pure devotee that has a mission to preach. So, and Prabhupada had that mission. It was given to him by his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It was given to him by his guru, and he realized that if he follows his guru's orders, everything will be taken care of. And so that's what happened. Even though we read that Prabhupada in the initial stages of arriving in Boston and then in New York, he, after a while, living here and living there, living in a little office building, after a while, he thought, no, I'll go back to India. And then he decided, no, well, he's going to follow a little more, give it a little more time, so he could actually serve the mission of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And we know the story then. Gradually, disciples started coming, and gradually this Krishna consciousness movement grew. So this power, this tremendous energy that emanated from Srila Prabhupada wasn't the artificial, like artificial suns, and we see the old icons. They have a halo around of the saints and so forth. That wasn't necessary to Prabhupada. You see photos nowadays on YouTube of people who are claiming, maybe they are, I don't know, spiritually realized. They put a little halo on them, little halo. With Prabhupada, it just wasn't necessary, because, what would that do? He was who he was, and he was extremely powerful. So this is giving you a little bit of my impressions when I first met Prabhupada, and I traveled with Prabhupada, and I got to know the person behind the power. It's like, when we walk out in the morning and then meet the morning sun, or even the sun like we have here in Sweden right now. You see the sun rays. And what we know from the Vedic literatures is that you can actually go through the sun rays to reach the sun planet, so to speak, and meet the personality of the sun. And there are people, which I actually met in India, who really impressed me, but in a different way. They lived on sunlight. The person I'm thinking about now, I watched him sit there and stare into the Hyderabad morning sun, the 12 o'clock sun, which was incredibly strong. He just sat there looking into the sun, nothing else. And he explained that's how he gets his energy flowing, keeping the energy in the body flowing. And they said, well, this was an assembly of doctors. I think I was the only one there. There was no doctor. But they said, that's not possible. You're going to burn out your eyes. He said, no. You start very little. You start looking at the reflection of the sun in the water, and gradually you can increase that, and eventually you can start looking at the sun directly. And he explained that as you do that, you will see that in the sun rays there is what he called like a blue energy, which is very, very cooling. And therefore, he said, the sun gives a lot of energy, and it doesn't burn you out because the blue energy cools you. And well, there were a lot of evidence that he was speaking the truth. We saw films. Actually, we saw an investigation by the chief of police in India, security actually, and who followed him for weeks and weeks to see if it was true that he could live on sunlight. Anyway, he did that. So to see the real, or to get to know the real personality behind the what should we say? I call it the Vyasa Prabhupada. The official Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasa speaking, and but I also happened to, early in my days as a devotee, got to see the person behind the vision that you had on Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasa. And it was generally the same sort of person, but when you were with him, then he could be very personal with you. So therefore, I got a little bit of understanding of who he was. Just like in Christianity, we had the problem of who was Jesus? Well, he's fully God and he's fully human. And that sort of seems to contradict each other. Somehow it must be inconceivable, just like we have our inconceivable parts of our philosophy. So it was simultaneously one and the other in Christianity. So to get to know, what shall we call it, the human Prabhupada, was crucial for me. Crucial, because that's when I could see whether how he was as a person when he wasn't on stage. And that understanding has kept me, not understanding, but the actual relationship has kept me as a disciple for all these 50 years. That is the power of a pure devotee. being with Prabhupada in the first temple there in Bombay, Akash Ganga building, of course, we all who were there, all devotees there, we were very close to Prabhupada because, well, it was a confined area. Prabhupada's door was mostly open, and we could go in and speak to him practically any time we wanted to, unless he had a visitor or he was chanting or whatever. But we could go in there and sit there just to be with him. And this time, my wife also joined. Well, she became my wife, but Madhvati joined, and we joined together. And her service in the temple was a lot to do with the kitchen. And it turned out to be that she was a good cook. And especially Prabhupada used to like her making chapatis. And there's a little funny story, well, several actually, in this regard, that Prabhupada noticed, and he asked, who makes these chapatis in the kitchen? And then, of course, she was she went into Prabhupada, and yeah, it's me. But many years after, when I think it was in Germany, in the Schloss Rettershof, Prabhupada toured the facilities, and he came to the kitchen, and my wife was there, but this time with a child. And he says, "Oh, Padmavati," and then he turned and he said to Hansadut, I suppose, was with him, "Oh, she makes very good chapatis." So he remembered. And many times when we met him again in England or in India, he would always ask, "How is your wife?" And he was concerned. And in Stockholm, when he came, she was heavily pregnant and gave birth to our first son the month after Prabhupada arrived. And he saw that she was dancing in the kirtan. And he told her not to do that. Be careful. Nice concern from a caring father. And this is something that, at least in my relationship and her relationship with Prabhupada, was like that. We had absolute faith in him, and we felt very secure in his presence, and that he cared for us as persons. And that again was very important to me. And when traveling with Prabhupada, I remember sitting on the plane, and even though you're a seasoned traveler and not scared of flying, still there's always a little insecurity there, isn't it? I mean, you're sitting in a little cigar-shaped aluminium shell into 10 kilometers up in the air. So there's always a bit of nervousness. But with Prabhupada, when I sat in the same plane with Prabhupada around the world, no such feelings. If Prabhupada is here, everything's going to be all right. If we fall down, it's going to be all right. If we don't, which I didn't think we would, it's perfectly all right. I'm safe being in the presence of Srila Prabhupada. And so this is another feature of being a surrendered soul to Prabhupada, being convinced by his conviction, and being safe in his presence. I know that devotees, Prabhupada disciples, and others have different types of understandings and relationships with Srila Prabhupada. And that's perfectly all right, because that's what life is about, isn't it? We see a person differently, depending on the context, depending on our conditioning, depending on our upbringing. We see each other, and of course also Srila Prabhupada, differently. So, and just like we're looking at Krishna, but some people see the rays emanating from the Krishna's body, his effulgence. Other people see Krishna and themselves in a relationship of being servants. Others as friends with Krishna. Others even as a child in relationship to the Father. Or ultimately as a lover. But it is the same object that we are focusing on. It is the same object. We just see it differently, depending on our rasa, our relationship with the Supreme Lord. And of course, the same principle is there when it comes to Prabhupada. So we all have different pictures in our mind of who Prabhupada was and is. Mm-hmm. So to understand that, sometimes we try to, we write books and we try to I shouldn't say copy, but we're influenced by other writers who are writing their opinion and how they perceive Prabhupada, the perception of Prabhupada. But actually, they were all individual experiences, all individual perceptions. So going with Prabhupada in Malaysia, I was traveling with him, and I could not, of course, bring my wife then, Padmavati. She stayed in India when I left with Prabhupada. She went eventually to Calcutta to help open the temple there. And as a part of that service, the devotees went down to Jagannath Puri to celebrate the Supreme Lord in the shape of Lord Jagannath. And from what she tells me, he was quite a remarkable experience for a young girl, new to India, new to Krishna consciousness. It made quite an impression on her. So traveling in India with Prabhupada was, Malaysia was done by car. And we traveled to the different engagements that were set up for Prabhupada. And again, it was like the people who had arranged the program was basically a few devotees, but they arranged it with the local people who wanted to meet Prabhupada. And these local people were of a different sort of quality. Some were not even vegetarian. And that meant that Prabhupada had a different approach to them. It didn't really want to take any food in the prasadam there. So it was interesting to see how he met and interacted with some of these people. Some people came and offered to finance a temple. And I thought, oh, wow, this is fantastic. But then when we spoke with Prabhupada afterwards, he was not very sure about that was going to happen. And he was right. It didn't happen. It turns out there were possibly a cheating arrangement going on. So learning through his example how to see through the eyes of a pure devotee, so to speak, was very, very helpful. And so traveling with him to these different preaching engagements also not only made me think about the world and the nature of the world, but also the nature of the pure soul in the world and his tolerance is the good word. Tolerance. Even though sometimes Prabhupada could exhibit anger when something was obviously stupid, but basically tolerance. We saw that when he was in Sweden also, when the car broke down that he was traveling in. Tolerance. He simply picked up his cane and says, okay, which way? And he was ready to walk. Without anger, just accepting the situation. He didn't have to walk. I better say that too. He didn't have to walk the car. He got to travel in a car. So and in Australia, we did the same thing. We met engagements set up by devotees, and I think one was called the Wayside Chapel, which was run by a Christian priest, and they were in the King's Cross area. King's Cross was the ultimate place of enjoyment. This is where the American soldiers who were fighting in Vietnam, when they got a little rest, they could go to Sydney or Hawaii, whichever they wanted. And so there were a lot of soldiers there. That means a lot of prostitution, a lot of drinking, and it attracted not only the American soldiers, but also young Australians. And in fact, I had lived there with Ajit and Padmavati before joining the temple. So there was a whole lot of movement going on all the time. But the core of it was sense enjoyment. Sense enjoyment now. So this priest, he was opening up his place to young Australians, mainly, who had problems with drugs. They were all welcome. They could come and eat there. They could attend programs. You know, it's a part of his preaching program. And funnily enough, Prabhupada had misunderstood his position when he was told about it, and he thought that this priest was the one that was taking the drugs and distributing the drugs. So that gave to quite a funny situation. But so Prabhupada was preaching there to all these young people, and I'm not sure if any devotees came from there, but well, I wouldn't be surprised because he made quite an impression. Well, the question of the relationship to the spiritual master, does it change over time? Well, I can only speak for myself and say, yes, it does. When I first met Prabhupada, I was young, inexperienced. I'd never met a person like Prabhupada of such a magnitude. And naturally, I had the respect, like a young man for an elderly man, also like for a neophyte to a master. So my relationship was tinged with a lot of awe and reverence. And I know that Srila Prabhupada did not demand that. I, in fact, know that he wanted a more of a, what shall we say, real relationship, a real conversation. So over the years, this understanding from what I saw when the Prabhupada really wanted from me at least, this more personal approach, it has matured. And I see so many devotees with so many different relationships with Prabhupada, and a lot of them are awe and reverence. I have gone the other way. Not that I've lost the respect and the reverence, not at all. But it's just that I have found over the years that Srila Prabhupada has kept me on, and that I could be very honest and natural with him. And that's not only when we met, this is also since he departed, because a disciple's relationship with the spiritual master does not die when the spiritual master leaves his human body. So even the years after Srila Prabhupada left, I found that this relationship was still there. And over the years, it meant that I turned to him and asked him questions, and perceived that I got answers. And eventually I had questions. I had questions on the philosophy and so many things, and I got them answered. And even doubts that I had, certain things, I went to Prabhupada and in my meditation and asked him, and but asked him with the formula that Krishna gives us in the Bhagavad Gita, not challenging. So and he answered these doubts, and that made me relax more and more, because I realized he knows who I am. He sees me for whom I am, and he still accepts me. So that made the relationship even more, what shall we say, secure. So that goes on every morning. In my meditation, I turn to Prabhupada, and every morning, well, not every morning, I get some sort of reply. Not every morning, I must say, but every morning there is a relationship where I submit whatever I have to submit. So, and sometimes I get an answer immediately, sometimes it comes a little later. But my confidence is that he's always looking after us. That I am totally sure of. And therefore, over the years, when there had been different times and different relationships with devotees and the ISKCON management and so forth, still, I had a conviction that if I'm doing something wrong, then Prabhupada, please instruct me. And he has. So so that's the relationship as it is now, like quite an intimate relationship. But you know, you can say, as an outsider, you can say, well, that's just imagination. Well, you of course you're free to see it that way. I don't see it that way at all. I see it as a very real relationship with a very real spiritual person. So, yeah, that is basically how I survive as a devotee. And you know, when we were in Melbourne the last time, when Prabhupada was in Melbourne, he asked me to come, and he said he had a new plan for preaching, and two other householders there, and he told us, just go to a place where there's no temple, get a job, and start inviting people back for prasadam and kirtan. So he wanted that to be tried out. At that time, then Ajit had written to Prabhupada and said that we'd like to go to Sweden. Prabhupada answered him and said, yes, sure, but I think Vegavan's there too, so why don't you ask him to come with you? And so he did, of course, and we went and opened up in Stockholm. My idea was to implement what Prabhupada said about just start to invite people back to the temple, even get a temple and dress like a normal person in the society, and start inviting people back. This is not to be confused that we should all do like that, but this was the specific instruction. So I wanted to do that. This was strongly opposed by the leadership in the GBC for our area at the time, and I wasn't allowed to do that. So I kept that in my mind. Can't do it now, all right. So I have to accept that. And but the opportunity came, and about 1986, 87, I started implementing this, and I learned what I'm doing now as a therapist, and I started holding courses, and so far there've been over 1,000 people have gone through these courses, and every one of them has gotten some understanding. We are not this body, spirit, soul, and so that the teaching could still go on. And I felt like, well, I feel convinced that I'm doing what I should and what I can do. Whether it is the ultimate, the best, or whatever, that's another thing. That's between me and Prabhupada. But basically, I feel that his instructions in me is alive. And I think for most of his disciples, the feeling would be the same. Prabhupada is alive within us, and we can have confirmation, or we can receive chastisement, just as it was in the days of physical proximity. Well, the starting up of Hare Krishna movement in Sweden, was it Ajit and me? Yes, it was. But also we had the help of our good wives, and we had the help of a brahmachari from England, but we picked him up while we were in Germany. His name was Narendra Das. So it was us 4 and 5 then that started the movement in Sweden. And how did it come about? Well, we borrowed a car from the German Yatra, the German devotees, and we traveled in Sweden, first of all around Stockholm area. Well, we were in Västerås, which is not far away from Stockholm. And then we went into Stockholm Center, started chanting and actually distributing a little pamphlet and collecting a little bit of money. And then eventually, well, quite quickly actually, we decided we don't want to travel all the way to Västerås every day. So we borrowed a tent and we went to a camping place, and we lived in a tent, and Narendra lived in the car, and and that's what we did, and until we had a bit of a money so we could pay the first rent on our house, which we found a house that was to let, and we moved there. Why? Because we needed a bigger place, because we heard that Prabhupada was coming. So by the time Prabhupada came, we already lived and had barely, but still furnished the house. And all the devotees came from Germany, Holland, England, and that's when we met Smita Krishna Maharaj before. Ajit did in Germany also, and then he came up with the other devotees from Germany and decided, well, it was decided that he should stay. So by that time, there were some people who joined already. A devotee called Dinesh Vida, who later became known as Dwarikesh, and he got some other sannyasi names also later on. He was probably the most prominent at that time, and another devotee, he was attending Prabhupada's lecture in Uppsala. His name is Aristahadas, who is now an elderly devotee and a very good poet. So in the beginning, it was very, very humble, but very quickly we managed to get this house, which was very nice, and Prabhupada liked it. And he even said we should make a temple in the backyard, build a temple, and buy the place, but that wasn't possible. I'm not sure what else I should say about these first times. We actually mainly stayed in Stockholm the first few months, and until after Prabhupada's departure, and leaving Sweden, and then we started carefully driving and expanding our book distribution around to the larger cities around Stockholm. Well, the way we started in Sweden was we were on the street and chanted a lot. Krishna Premi, the wife of Ajit then, she was a wonderful singer, and even Prabhupada said that she was crying for Krishna, love for Krishna. And she is due to come back to Sweden in a few months for like a little reunion. But so we chanted a lot, and we distributed a lot. And yes, we were on the street most part of the day, changing between distributing a little booklet called Krishna All Glädjes Källa, which had been translated by a combination of Ajit and Smita Krishna Das Brahmachari. And but it, in Germany, they didn't have an O, so they had to draw a circle above the A for every single for every single O in the book. So it looked pretty clumsy, but we got 5 crowns or something for it, and that's how we were distributing the books in the main walking streets, practically actually outside the bank, which became our bank later on. And they saw us, and they saw that we collected and came in every day faithfully depositing some money. So it was a lot. It was a lot of chanting, a lot of book distribution, and our activities were, well, we had a lot of activities. We had, of course, the ordinary readings, studying the scriptures. And we did quite a few hours of studying, actually. The Srimad Bhagavatam in the morning. We had Ishopanishad, which was printed in English, and we had well, at that time, these were the three main ones. Bhagavad Gita, of course, in the evening. Later on, Krishna book came out, and well, it never came out in Swedish until years later, but we had the English copy. So we had an English reading later in the evening of the Krishna book. So it was a full-on program. Uh, 1973, yes, we came there in the summer, in the beginning of summer, and Prabhupada came in September. So we had to very quickly organize not only ourselves, but also Prabhupada's visit, and where was he going to lecture, and so forth, and programs arranged with the universities, the philosophical faculty, and the main intellectual society for Christians in just outside Stockholm. Yeah, so it was a lot of things to arrange. When I say prepare for Prabhupada, there are certain things you can do and a lot of things you can't do because you don't know what Prabhupada is going to want. But we knew that he thought of in Sweden that there were many scholars. And because he also knew Ajit and he knew myself, we had instructions before to approach the intellectual, the academic world. So that's why there was arranged these programs at the universities and intellectual centers around in Stockholm. Why Sweden? Why did Prabhupada come to Sweden? Well, he was going to come to Germany, and our GBC in Germany was then Hansaduta, and somehow or other, I'm not really sure who mentioned it, but I think it was an American devotee who lived in Germany who came up to Sweden also shortly before Prabhupada's arrival, and he was acting GBC for Germany for a while, and he invited Prabhupada. That's what it was, and Prabhupada was very keen to come. And I remember he was asking Ajit Prabhu was arranging a lecture at the Faculty of Philosophy, the philosophical faculty, where both he and I attended before joining devotees as a devotee, and he asked Ajit, what are people interested in, and Ajit had told him that right now the mood in Sweden is very political, left wing, and after speaking to the philosophical faculty, which was dry, and they were not particularly interested in this. He Prabhupada again asked, what is the interest, and Ajit again, explained that it is politics. So when Prabhupada came to the big hall, university hall later on, which was open to everyone, not just students, he was attacked, not physically but verbally, by a lot of people. There were a lot of refugees from South America, where Pinochet had taken power and so forth, and they were left wing. And Prabhupada gave a provocative lecture. You might have heard. He gave a provocative lecture about first-class men, second-class, third-class, and fourth-class men. And he explained the duties of these four classes. And they got really provoked by that. And Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasan because we had carried this big Vyasasan in. And here he was sitting on the on a raised seat. So it was a very provocative stance. So Prabhupada gave a lecture, and after and the questions, they started screaming at him, and so you think you're the best, you think you're the first class man. Prabhupada says, no, I think I'm the fifth class because I'm the servant of all the other classes. And it was a very, very, very nice answer. Of course, it didn't really make them quiet, but somehow it appeased them a little bit. So afterwards, Prabhupada said, well, maybe we just have a small chair to sit on, a chair to sit on, and if you do future lectures like that. Same thing happened to him, and I think in France. Also, the Vyasasans, the big elaborate Vyasasans, did provoke a lot of people. So we should keep them in the temples and maybe have more modest sitting arrangements for Prabhupada. So that's one thing. And what I remember specifically, where I was really impressed by Prabhupada, was when we came from the preaching engagement in, I told you about the Christian Intellectual Center, which is a retreat center. People come there to study, people come there to write their books. And Prabhupada gave a lecture there, and there were all sorts of philosophers and Christians there. And Prabhupada skillfully avoided getting dragged into theological discussions. He wanted to say his thing, and he kept to the theme. But anyway, on the way back into Stockholm City, the car broke down that Prabhupada was in. And I just remember everyone else was flipping out, oh, what's Prabhupada going to do? And Prabhupada just said that, well, we'll just walk. And he took up his cane, and he wanted to walk, but fortunately the situation was saved. But he was ready to deal with it. And he just asked how far is it, and it was a few kilometers, and he was ready to walk. I was really impressed by that. You'd think a prominent person in a religious organization would get very, very angry, and I saw that later on, not with Prabhupada, but with others who took this responsibility of guru when things didn't work out the way they had planned. Some people lost their tempers. Prabhupada kept his cool. And what did I feel? Well, I felt stressed is a good word, because all of a sudden we were 5 or 6 devotees first, and all of a sudden we were 40, 50, and we had to accommodate them somehow, and we had to because they parked the cars and blocked the whole street practically, and they thought, well, with Prabhupada we can do anything we like, and especially the German devotees, and the neighbors, of course, were very angry. So we had to go and talk to them, make sure that everyone was happy, and make sure all the devotees were happy, make sure they got something to eat, and place to sleep. So I was busy, really, really busy, and stressed. And it has the extra tension with Srila Prabhupada, of course. And in between all this, I try to sneak off to be with Prabhupada, like on the balcony in the morning. He would take his massage. I could be there for a little while, and so forth. But if you want a word for it, I can say I was stressed and happy and excited. When Prabhupada left, the first reaction was exhaustion and emptiness. What are we going to do now? For months, we'd just been focusing on Prabhupada. Prabhupada's coming, Prabhupada this and Prabhupada that. And all of a sudden, Prabhupada had been here, like a whirlwind tour. It was quite long, but still a short time for us. And when he left, it was like feeling like he left us, because he didn't. And we pretty soon we realized that we got to keep on doing what we've always done: on the street, distribute books, and chant. So that's what we did. And by the time Prabhupada left, we had got 2 new devotees from his preaching, Aristaha and Dwarkesh. And we got another devotee that wanted to stay. He was from England, Bhumadev. So all of a sudden we were a few more devotees. So we made a bigger impression on the street. And then gradually we wanted to get closer into the city. We were in a suburb. So we moved into a very I'm smiling a little bit because it was a very austere place in a cellar. One room, which was the temple room, was above ground, and the other rooms were underneath. And it was had no hot water, and so the devotees living in the cellar itself had to shower in ice cold water. And but that sort of is part of growing up as a devotee. So that became our temple. And by 1977 early, we decided we had to do something. And we had to get out of the place, keep it, but we had to get another bigger place. So we started looking, and we found a beautiful place just outside Stockholm called Korsnäsgård. And it was an amazing place. And we thought, how on earth are we going to be able to afford this? We checked the bank account and we had 12,000 crowns, I think. And but still we knew that everything is possible. So we started inquiring more. And it turns out that one of the devotees, he just been to America and he came back. His father was a friend of, oh boy, how to say this? He was a friend of a previous owner to that place. And the previous owner had kept, he had sold it to a gangster, the mafia. And the mafia and the gangster had killed himself behind one of the buildings there. So there was really no ownership. So this friend of our devotee's father, he decided he liked us. We went to see him. This time we were dressed in normal clothes and wigs on. So we went to see him because we didn't want to scare him. But he liked us, and he decided that yes, we should have the place. And we managed to get a loan from England, and it's amazing. The day of signing the contract, we were sitting in the room, and then a man bursts in. He turned out to be a very, very wealthy owner of a prestigious restaurant both in Stockholm and in Södertälje. And he said, I'll double what they are giving, and I'll pay cash. So then we thought, oh, the opportunity is gone, But this man, and his name was Mr. Boulin, the one that liked us, the one that had money still in the property, he said no. He didn't like the man to burst in like that. And so he let us sign the contract, which was an amazing thing because we thought it was finished. And by that time, and then it just increased and increased and increased. And 70, that was 77, 78, 79. We are approaching about 100 devotees. And we had expanded into Denmark, and we had in Finland, we had a little preaching center also in Norway, and then we decided, well, we shall get a farm, because that was the popular theme in those days, in the beginning of the 80s, to get a farm, self-sufficient. And then we found a farm, and it was owned by a big, well, actually they manufactured fodder for cows. So they had used it as an experimental place where they could see how the cows were responding to the fodder and so forth. And it was big, it had lots of buildings on it, and so we thought, this is perfect. And then we decided to put an offer in, which was accepted. But the neighbors didn't like it. They had all sorts of stories. Oh, they're going to let the cows die on the fields. They're not, all sorts of stories that we wouldn't take care of the place. And basically, they didn't want the buildings, but they wanted the ground. They wanted the land. So they made all sorts of trouble, and then we were denied. The two instances, Jordbruksverket and Jordbruksstyrelsen, they were denied. We were approved in one and denied on the other. And this was taking on. And then we appealed that, and we produced a document showing that one devotee he's actually a certified farmer from Czechoslovakia. And so we had the knowledge to farm and to take care of cows. And eventually this took over a year of negotiations, and the owners of the company were so sick and tired of this back and forth. And I was all the time trying to appease them and trying to make sure they don't sell to someone else. But they were, I knew they were all sort of tired and wanted to get rid of the place. So, and then we got the final approval from the government. And then I went there and told them, and says, all right, we'll sign. Yes. But for, I gave a very low quote, reducing the price. I don't know where that came from, but I'm not a businessman, but that's Krishna's arrangement. So, and they were, all right. They decided to approve it at a much less cost than it was agreed from the beginning. So we were happy. We were happy. And that is the beginning of the yatra. We had the farm, we had Korsnäs Gård, which was expanding like anything, and we had about 125 devotees, and we had a preaching center in town, which we turned into a restaurant, Govinda's restaurant, very successful. So we thought, well, this is enough for Stockholm, and the next expansion was to really solidify Göteborg and start off on Malmö. And yeah, that's the beginning of the yatra in Sweden. In 10 years, we had all these big properties. Well, of course, the times were special because Prabhupada was there, and we were all practically 100% centered around Prabhupada. Krishna is one thing, Lord Chaitanya, Gaunitai, another thing, but our main focus was Prabhupada. And so we were all, we had one sun, and we were all gathered around it. Therefore, and also because we started a whole new movement. So we pioneers, and we experienced similar difficulties. We made same type of mistakes. So there was, of course, a lot of strain. Being a devotee, it was new to us, and it was new to the Western world. So there were special tensions. Not to speak from the, even Prabhupada, from Prabhupada's point of view, he wanted things done. And we felt that, we had to live up to his expectations. So there was a lot of strain, a lot of stress, actually, and a lot of difficulties finding out new things, how to do bookkeeping, how to do this and that, and organize a society. So it was because of the newness and the pioneering spirit, we had to rely on ourselves and our God brothers and God sisters. So there is a special bond because we all know what it was like in those days, and there was none of the comforts, so to speak, of an organized society. So we had to discover that, yeah, so there were special times, and therefore it is very special relationships. Well, that of course depends on the God brother and the God sister, or what type of relationship you have. Because just because we're God brothers and God sisters didn't mean that we had the same relationship with everyone. But generally speaking, yes, we do have a common bond, and we know how to speak, so to speak, to each other, because we know their background. And so it is a special bond, whether or not you will call it unique. Well, it has to be unique because no one else that we will meet will have the same experience with Srila Prabhupada in the beginning of the movement. For example, many of us who were there rather early experience, and especially Prabhupada in India, early in India, we experienced a very, very relaxed Prabhupada. And he was walking, amongst us like an ordinary devotee. Not quite true, but nearly. So we have that experience. We have the experience of Prabhupada, how to deal with the Indian nationals. So there were a lot of things in common that we have. So yes, there is a special bond, whether or not it is a special good bond or a special bad bond, bit of both, I would say. I met Prabhupada in several times, several places. Of course, I traveled with him to Australia, and after a while, I helped open a temple. I did open a temple, me and my wife, in Perth, which is on the other side of Australia. I traveled to see Prabhupada when he arrived back in Melbourne, and I got a very special instruction from Prabhupada. I'm not sure if I have mentioned it in these films that we are doing before, but myself and two other householders were instructed to come to see Prabhupada, and that we did. And Prabhupada said that I'd like you to go to different places. Don't dress as a devotee. Have normal clothes, gentlemen, and get a job, and start inviting people home for prasadam. And you start that way. So Prabhupada wanted to try something new. And that's really one of the main things that stuck in my mind. And when we went from Australia to Sweden, I wanted to do that. But the GBC at the time did not like it at all. And he said that has to wait. And so anyway, I had to wait. But I remember that instruction so clearly. It's still so strong in my mind. And it's something that I am doing now. The other times I met Prabhupada was in Germany. The first time he came to Germany, I got the shock of my life. We traveled to Germany by car, devotees from Stockholm. And by that time, we'd had met some Danish people, a Danish couple in Sweden. And we encouraged them to follow us, come with us to Germany. And then when we started coming into Germany and getting close to Schloss Rettishof, we started seeing these posters. Der Führer kommt. And I got the shock of my life. And of course, our Danish bhaktas flipped out totally because they'd been under German occupation. And to see that the Führer is coming gave a very, very bad taste. And for me too, of course. I couldn't understand what were they thinking to do like that. And of course it agitated people in Germany. Of course there was aggression. But I remember, that aside, I remember Prabhupada coming, being very wonderful as usual. And he came and he saw me and he says, all right, so where is your wife, Vegavan Prabhu? And I said, oh, in the kitchen, I think. And she was in the temple kitchen. And eventually Prabhupada walked there and he says, oh, Padmavati, you make such wonderful chapatis, because she'd been cooking for Prabhupada in India for a while. So he remembered many, many years later. And then a lot of stories. When he came to Sweden, he was very particular about my wife. She was pregnant and he didn't want her to dance because of pregnancy. And then later on in Germany, then there was the baby was born, our oldest son, Murlidhar, and he was making noises as the babies do. So she was in the lecture and she stood up to leave, and then Prabhupada says, "Yeah, well, you get something nice, and there's a cost to it." Something to that exact words I don't remember, but you get something nice like a baby, but there's also a price. You can't do everything that you want. So that was a nice exchange. I met Prabhupada in India a few times, of course, Mayapur. I remember when he came from his walk, and we all devotees were paying our obeisances to Prabhupada. When he came back, his feet stopped where my head. I looked up and I saw Prabhupada's feet, and I was wondering, what's he doing? So I kept down. And then after a while, I looked up and he looked at me and says, "Oh, Vegavan Prabhu, why haven't you come to see me?" And I said, "Oh," I mumbled something, nervously. And then he walked on, and later on, one of his servants came to pat me on my shoulder during the lecture, and he said, "Prabhupada wants to see you." And I went up to see Prabhupada, thinking that he had either something that I'd done wrong, or that he had something very important to tell me. And it turned out he just wanted to talk. He just wanted to talk. And what did we talk about? Oh, that when you make kachuris, you should do it with mustard seed oil, normal things like that. And I was quite, yeah, but when is it coming? When is the important thing coming? The important thing was association with Prabhupada. On a friendly, I shouldn't say equal, because I didn't certainly feel equal, but on a very friendly basis. So that was one lesson, really important lesson that I learned, that, exalted as Prabhupada may have been, he appreciated normal association. I suppose when I think about it now, older, you must be tired of people all the time obeying and bowing down and yes, Prabhupada. And who are you going to relate to? You want to relate to a person. And so Prabhupada wanted to be related to also as a person. That is a lesson I will never forget. I met him in not only in Mayapur, I met him in Hyderabad. I met him in New Mayapur, which is in France, and in Paris. But the one I wanted to tell you about is the Vyas Puja. The Vyas Puja 1977, which means that it was Prabhupada's last Vyas Puja on this earth. August, September, exactly, I don't remember. And Prabhupada was very, very weak at that time. He had to more or less be carried up the stairs and down, and put on the Vyasa in Bhaktivedanta manner. And I was asked to do the puja, and I did. And then I saw Prabhupada beckoning Tamal Krishna Maharaj, asking something. Tamal looked at me, and then he answered. I finished the puja, of course, and Prabhupada said a few words and then went up to his room, or was carried up. And I asked Tamal Krishna Maharaj, what did he say? He said he wanted to know who was doing the puja, because he could hardly see. He was practically blind at that time. So who was doing the puja? And Maharaj said, there's Vegavan Prabhu. And Prabhupada smiled, and that was it. Another really, because of the situation, because it was the last Vyas Puja, I have very strong emotions about that one. Yeah. He was a complex person, Srila Prabhupada. Very, very strong, very, very forceful, but also very, very soft. What did I like most about Srila Prabhupada? Well, I can tell you one thing anyway, what I liked most. That was his smile. His smile, that was something you longed for. You wanted to make Prabhupada smile. You wanted to please Prabhupada. But his smile was something very special. You could drown in it. That's one thing. That's one thing I really loved about Srila Prabhupada. His laughter and his smile. But what else did I like about Srila Prabhupada? I liked his strength, his conviction. He would not be deviated, or he couldn't be tricked into going out on a tangent. He kept what he wanted to do. He exactly knew what he wanted to convey, and he kept to it. And he didn't care for academic niceties and things like that. He knew what he wanted to say, and he, of course, thought that was the most important thing. So I like that. I really liked to see that he never wavered. He never capitulated to ego, false ego. He was always true to himself and to his mission. That's something I've never seen in anybody, anytime. He was true. He was really true. And people may say many things about him who don't know him, because they assume that the leader of a religious movement must be eventually corrupted, either by money or by sexual attraction or whatever. Prabhupada wasn't. Prabhupada wasn't. He was true to his vows. He was true to his convictions. I mean, who's ever seen such a person? I don't know anyone. When I look in the world today, I don't see anyone of that stature that can't be bought by money, women, flattery. No. You knew where you had Prabhupada. I like that. Totally honest. That's what I liked about Prabhupada, apart from his smile. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama